What's up, everybody? This is Dr. Nick with Leverage Media, and welcome to another episode of Path to a Million podcast. Got some news on the Senate bill that will most likely pass. It's called the Paycheck Protection Program Extension Act. So basically, what it's going to be mainly focused on is and the thing that is going to probably impact the most chiropractors is that it is going to allow borrowers 16 weeks to use their loan funds instead of 8 weeks. It also, that's going to be the biggest thing. And I'm going to probably do another video of, I need to think through it a little bit more and read the rules from the loan forgiveness another time to figure out the best way that you'll be able to maximize the money over those 16 weeks. There's some things that are very beneficial to employers in the forgiveness rules, and if they pair that with extending this for 16 weeks, there's definitely, especially if you're earlier on in your 8 weeks than others. If you're late in your 8 weeks, like I think I've got maybe like 2 weeks left of the 8 weeks, it's not going to make that big of a difference. But for those that are maybe in week 2 or week 3, it can make a big difference, especially if you're not back up to full speed yet. So that's going to be the biggest change. The other thing is it's going to extend the deadline to apply for a PPP from June 30th to December 31st. I would guess that most people that listen to me have already gotten their PPP money, or they at least have gotten their loan in. But if you haven't, it would extend it to December 31st. It would also allow borrowers to use loan funds to purchase personal protective equipment for employees and to pay for adaptive investments needed to reopen safely. So those adaptive investments include modifications to a commercial property to comply with public health guidelines from CDC and other relevant federal agencies. These investments could include creating or expanding a drive-through window, physical barriers such as sneeze guards or ventilation system upgrades, etc. So if you needed to buy masks, if you needed to buy sanitizer, gloves, put up sneeze guards, like all of that, you could use your PPP money for. And then it says, clarify that borrowers who have maintained payroll for 8 weeks will not lose loan forgiveness due to the extension of the program to 16 weeks. So that means, so there's 2 ways that, well, there's more than 2 ways, but the main 2 ways of kind of working within this PPP system is, one way is to just, you just kept people on and you use the money to keep people on. Even if you were, like for my office, I was closed for 4 weeks. 2 of my staff members were still going into the office and doing some work, seeing a couple of patients, like emergency patients. But everyone else was at home. And even when we reopened, it was just the 2 of them for, I think, the first 2, maybe 3 weeks of that. So through this entire PPP thing, I basically used the money the way that it was intended, which was keep your staff on your payroll. And when we thought that we only had the 8 weeks to use it, it wouldn't have made sense not to use it on payroll, because it's like you couldn't really use it on anything else. Like I only had a few $1,000s of other things that I could use it on. So it's like, well, if we're going to get it, the only way to be able to get it forgiven is to use it. And so I just basically paid people to do little projects here and there at home, but it was definitely not a 40-hour work week for any of them. Had we known that it was going to be 16 weeks, we could have probably figured a lot of different ways to use that money and to utilize unemployment and try to work it out to where it would be the best for the employees as well as the business. So my point with that was that, so for me, I brought these people back, but if it gets extended to 16 weeks, they're saying that it doesn't, like at the end of the 8 weeks, if the PPP money is run out and or maybe I go like 10 weeks instead of 8 weeks. At the end of the 10 weeks, I don't have to keep everyone for 6 more weeks to be able to apply for loan forgiveness. So that kind of clarifies something that I was kind of wondering about from the beginning, which was, well, what if, because it says you have to bring your head count back to what it was February 15th on by June 30th. But if your PPP money runs out before June 30th, there's a gap. Do you have to maintain that head count? And this is basically saying that you don't. And then the last thing is clarify the lender hold harmless provision, ensures that lenders are not held liable for the borrower's certification and documentation they provide when applying for a PPP and subsequent forgiveness. Additionally, lenders who followed PPP guidance released by SBA Treasury are not held liable for doing so if that guidance changed. So this is what we've been talking about the whole time: is the banks are the ones that were in charge of figuring out what you were approved for. The banks will be in charge of figuring out how much you're forgiven for. The SBA or the Treasury is not holding them responsible if somebody's documentation isn't correct, or if they don't do the math correct, or the certifications aren't right. So the SBA and the Treasury can always come back and audit you, and you're liable for it. Like you'll have to pay it back if you didn't do it correctly, but the banks are not. And the reason why this is important is because in the beginning, they wanted to be able to get that money out fast, and banks are conservative, so they wouldn't have lent it as fast if they didn't have that hold harmless provision. And it's going to be the same way with the forgiveness. I think that they're just going to basically, they've got 4.4 million loans that have gone out, so they're going to get this stuff out quickly, I believe. So as long as you fill out your worksheet and your Schedule A, and you've got proper documentation for it, the forgiveness process, I think, is going to be pretty smooth and pretty easy, especially for smaller employers like us. So that's what's in the Paycheck Protection Program. Just to recap: extend the deadline for a PPP application, like to apply for the loan, from June 30th to December 31st. Allow borrowers 16 weeks to use their loan funds instead of 8 weeks. Allow borrowers to use loan funds to purchase PPE for employees and to pay for adaptive investments needed to reopen safely, like drive-through windows, sneeze guards, ventilation system upgrades, like that. Clarify the borrowers who have maintained payroll for 8 weeks will not lose that forgiveness, or will not lose loan forgiveness due to the extension of the program to 16 weeks, and clarify the lender hold harmless provision. So for those of you early on in your 8 weeks, I think this is going to be an interesting development. It'll give you some leeway, and you'll maybe be able to be a little bit more strategic with your money. For those of us that are towards the end, I think it'll just basically allow us to extend the amount that we're using for payroll for a couple more weeks. But yeah, so anyway, if you guys have any questions on this, drop a comment below, and I will get to them later today. And I'll just be making a few more videos around some of the specifics on this as we go. All right, have a good one.